They arrested me at 7 in the morning, my own penthouse. I was still barefoot. The charge, forgery, my signature on trust documents, $1.8 billion. My husband filed the report. He watched them take me. I was 300 miles away when those papers were signed. Someone sat in my chair and wrote my name. No one knew the difference. 4 days before the transfer locks permanently, every hour I spent in handcuffs was an hour closer to losing everything my father built. I stopped grieving the marriage, and I found what he never expected me to find. You'll know he's the villain. You'll be right. But by the end, you'll understand why being right doesn't feel like winning. I was measuring coffee when the knock came. 6:52 in the morning. I know because I looked at the microwave clock, and it's one of those stupid details you hold on to afterward. The precise minute before everything divides into before and after. 2 knocks. Not loud, patient. The kind of knock that already knows you'll answer. I crossed the living room in bare feet, marble cold through the silk. 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass, December light just starting to blue the city below. I remember thinking it was the building manager. The heating had been inconsistent all week. I opened the door. 2 plainclothes officers, badges held at chest height. The shorter one looked past me into the apartment the way people do when they're counting. Cosima Larchment? My name in a stranger's mouth, pronounced correctly, spoken like a line item on a page he'd been carrying in his pocket. They had a warrant. The taller one read the charge while I stood in my own foyer in a silk robe. Forgery. Trust amendment documents authorizing the transfer of $1.8 billion from the Larchment Family Trust to an entity called Redstone Capital Partners. My signature on the filing page. I hadn't signed anything. I said so. Standing in my own marble foyer in my own home, I said it clearly. I didn't sign anything. They don't respond to that. I learned later that every single person they arrest says exactly those words. By the time it reaches an officer's ears, it means nothing. The handcuffs were warm from his pocket. You'd expect cold steel. I did. But someone had been carrying them against his hip, waiting for my door to open. My wedding band pressed into my finger beneath the cuff. 5 years on that hand. And Theron. My husband was standing in the hallway to our bedroom, 6 feet back. Navy cashmere pullover, white t-shirt underneath, coffee in his right hand. He'd been awake, dressed. I could see from across the room that his hair was already parted, already styled, at 6:52 in the morning. He didn't move toward me, didn't speak. He held his mug and wore the face of a man watching something regrettable happen to someone he cared about. Brow slightly furrowed, lips pressed together, eyes soft with a concern so careful it could have been rehearsed. I didn't know that yet. I looked at him across our foyer and I thought, help me. He sipped his coffee. They walked me through the living room, past the kitchen where my coffee machine was still dripping into the carafe, finishing the job I'd started in a life that was already over, past the painting I'd bought at auction 3 years ago, through the front door, into the elevator where 2 officers and a woman in a silk robe stood in very expensive silence. The doorman held the lobby door open without looking at me. A man who'd said good morning to me every day for 5 years stared at the marble floor while they guided me by the elbows through his lobby. Into a car, into a precinct, into a system that doesn't care what your foyer is made of. And somewhere between the elevator and the back seat, I stopped being confused. Not angry yet. Specific. Who had documents with my name? What entity? What transfer? And why was my husband standing in our hallway, dressed and ready before 7, holding a mug he'd already filled before the knock came? The night before, Sunday, 18 hours earlier, our kitchen island, take out from the Italian on 63rd. He poured the wine. I told him about a foundation meeting that had been boring, and he laughed at the right moments. He asked about my week. I asked about his. That was the last ordinary dinner I'll ever have with the man I married. And here's what I keep coming back to. Even then, even at that counter with the pasta and the wine and his careful laugh, something sat wrong. His questions were a beat too rehearsed. He asked about my Thursday plans twice. I noticed. I filed it. I poured more wine. 5 years I did that. Noticed, filed, poured. Tuesday morning, 27 hours after the arrest. They'd given me back my things at processing: phone, watch, wedding ring in a clear plastic bag. I put the phone in my pocket, the watch on my wrist. The ring I left in the bag. I don't know why. I didn't decide to. My hand just knew before the rest of me caught up. Bail was $500,000. Petra Holmgren, my attorney, the only one willing to take a case where the client can't pay, scraped it from the only liquid accounts that weren't frozen. The trust accounts, every single one, locked by court order. $1.8 billion with my name on the paperwork, and I couldn't buy lunch without checking a balance. Petra took the case on contingency. That means she doesn't get paid unless I do. It also means she wouldn't have taken it if she thought I was going to lose. I didn't find that comforting. I found it clarifying. Her office was midtown, glass, steel, right angles. No warmth, no art. Just screens and paper and the flat white light of a place where people bill by the 6-minute increment. I sat across a conference table from her in a black sweater and dark trousers I'd grabbed from my closet without looking. The first time in 5 years I'd gotten dressed without caring how I looked. Petra, late 40s, sharp face, sandy hair threaded with silver pulled back tight, greeting glasses around her neck, slid a folder across the glass. These are the trust amendment documents filed Friday. I opened the folder. Cream-colored legal paper, dense printed text, and at the bottom of the final page, my signature. I need you to understand something. It was perfect. Every loop in the C, the way I cross my L's low, the place where I press down harder at the start of the M. My handwriting has a tell. The tail of my final T drops left instead of right. Most people curve right. I don't. This signature had it. Whoever wrote my name hadn't copied my handwriting from a sample. They'd studied it the way you study a language. Not the words, the rhythm. The transfer directed everything in the Larchmont Family Trust, everything my father built, to an entity called Redstone Capital Partners. I'd never heard the name, never seen it on a statement, a contract, a conversation. I looked up from the paper. Who filed the amendment? Petra opened a second folder, thinner, 1 page. The police report, filed by Theron Lassiter. My husband, the man who held his coffee while they put me in handcuffs. He picked up the phone. He called the police. He accused his own wife of forging documents to steal her own inheritance. And that's when the math changed. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding, this wasn't a filing error at the trust company. My husband built an accusation, signed a report, and triggered an arrest, knowing exactly what those hours of custody would cost me. Not pride, not dignity, time. Petra walked me through the numbers, and the numbers were the real weapon. The trust amendment was filed Friday, the contestation window 5 business days from the filing date. Friday, day 1, Monday, day 2, Tuesday, day 3. Deadline, Thursday, close of business. 2 working days, that's what I had. 48 hours to prove I didn't sign those documents, prove someone else did, and prove my husband was the one who paid for it. If I missed Thursday, the transfer becomes permanent, irrevocable. $1.8 billion and my father's name directed to an entity I'd never heard of, controlled by the man who reported me for the crime he commissioned. He designed my arrest as a clock. Every hour of my confusion was an hour closer to his payday. The handcuffs weren't the punishment, they were the delay. Year 2 of the marriage, a restaurant on the Upper East Side, the kind where the menu doesn't show prices because the question itself disqualifies you. Theron had restructured part of the trust portfolio that quarter, grew it by a significant margin. He was genuinely proud, I remember that, the pride in his face, real and uncomplicated in a way I rarely saw. He had a glass of Barolo in his hand and that half smile he does, right side higher than the left, when he thinks he's being charming, and he said, "Your father built a fortress, not a trust." I laughed. He didn't. I noticed that too. Filed it. Poured. Petra was watching me from across the conference table. She reads people the way other attorneys read briefs, patiently, looking for the thing that doesn't fit. After a moment, she set down her pen. "What do you want to do?" I could negotiate, offer Theron a number, a quiet divorce, a fraction of the trust, everyone walks away with something, swallow the arrest, protect the name, move on. Or I could fight. 2 days, frozen accounts, a perfect forgery, and a husband who turned the legal system into a countdown. Fight and destroy my marriage on the public record. Confirm every quiet reservation my dead father never said out loud about the man I chose. I set the folder down on her glass table. Prove it wasn't me. Prove it was him, whatever it costs. Petra gave a single nod. Slight, definitive. She didn't promise anything. She didn't reassure me. She picked up her phone and started dialing. That nod was the only comfort I was going to get for the rest of the week. It was enough. Petra's team had results by Tuesday afternoon. When someone's billing against your frozen assets and the clock's already at day 3, fast is the only speed that exists. Tuesday afternoon, the glass conference table again. Overhead light that turned everything into evidence. Petra pulled the charity gala records, the event I'd attended the previous Thursday. Time-stamped photographs. I arrived at 7:15 p.m., gave a keynote at 8:30. 400 guests, 3 photographers, a videographer who caught me mid-sentence on the podium with a time code running in the corner of the frame. The trust amendment was signed at 7:40 p.m. that same Thursday evening at a satellite office approximately 300 miles south of the gala venue. 7:15, I'm walking into a ballroom. 7:40, someone is sitting in a signing room 300 miles away writing my name on documents that transfer everything I own. 8:30, I'm at a podium giving a speech about arts education funding. Whoever was in that chair was already gone. Physical impossibility, that's what Petra called it. I exhaled for the first time in 2 days. And then the second thing hit me. Theron had encouraged me to go to that gala. 3 weeks before, he'd walked into the kitchen holding the invitation. "You should go, Cosima. You love those events." He handed it to me with that asymmetric smile, the one where the right side lifts higher than the left, and said, "Take the jet. Make it a weekend of it." I thought it was generous. I thought he was being supportive. He needed me 300 miles away on Thursday evening. That's what generous meant. That's what take the jet meant. He wasn't supporting my schedule. He was clearing his. 3 weeks of planning visible in a single sentence. Make it a weekend of it. 4 words, an alibi for him and a cage for me, except the cage put me exactly where I'd need to be to prove I wasn't in that room. He didn't think I'd ever need to prove it. He thought the forgery was perfect and the deadline would do the rest. I had proof I wasn't there. But proof of absence isn't proof of fraud. Proving I didn't sign doesn't prove who did. And right now, as far as the law was concerned, my signature was still sitting on that amendment, perfect, notarized, and one day closer to permanent. Who was in that chair? Wednesday morning. I changed clothes for the first time since bail. Dark wool trousers, a fitted black sweater, my leather boots. I remember choosing deliberately, not because it mattered what I wore to a trust company, because I needed to feel like a person who made choices, not a person things happened to. Petra and I drove to the satellite office where the signing took place, Financial District. The building looked like every other glass and limestone block on the street, 12 stories of institutional nothing, fluorescent lights, beige carpet, the kind of place where billion-dollar decisions happen under lighting that makes everyone look slightly ill. The notary was a woman in her 50s, professional, composed. She looked at me across a small conference table and said with total certainty, "Yes, you were here, you signed, I watched you." She described the signer: my height, my approximate build, dark hair, tailored clothing, confident demeanor. She said the signing took about 11 minutes, and the woman, me, she believed, reviewed the documents thoroughly before signing. I sat across from this woman who had watched a stranger impersonate me and was completely, unshakably certain she had watched the real thing. I wanted to scream at her. I didn't. Then she said something else. "You kept your sunglasses on the whole time." She paused, adjusting her own glasses. I remember thinking it was a little unusual for an indoor signing, but some clients are particular. Sunglasses. I have never worn sunglasses to a legal proceeding. I don't wear sunglasses indoors at all. It's one of those small pretensions that always irritated me and other people. But I filed the detail. I didn't have room in my head to process it yet. One line. Forward. Pause. On our way out, a trust company officer, mid-level, cautious, the kind of man who checks his phrasing twice, mentioned something to Petra that stopped me in the corridor. The in-person requirement on the Larchmont Trust is non-standard. Most trusts of this size allow authorized representatives or digital execution for amendments, but this trust requires the named beneficiary to appear physically with government ID for any modification. Petra looked at me. I looked at the floor. My father added that clause. It wasn't boilerplate. It wasn't standard practice. He specifically required my physical presence, my hand, my face, my body in a chair for any amendment to the trust he built. He designed it before I had met Saron, before I had married anyone, before there was anyone to protect me from. He saw this coming. Not Farron specifically, but the architecture of the threat. A man who would try to access what he built through someone she loved. He built the wall, and the wall is exactly why Theron needed to hire someone to sit in my chair. Without that clause, he could have forged documents remotely. No actress, no signing room, no notary, no CCTV. My father's safeguard forced the workaround. The workaround created the evidence trail. He was protecting me from a threat I hadn't met yet, and I married the threat anyway. Wednesday, just after noon. Back at Petra's office, her forensic team had been running traces on Redstone Capital Partners since Tuesday night, and by the time we walked through the door, the results were laid out on the conference table like an autopsy. Shell Company, registered 6 months ago in Delaware, because of course Delaware, where corporate ghosts go to be born. Registered agent, a boutique law firm in Connecticut I'd never heard of. Behind the law firm, a single signatory account at a private bank, and behind the account, one name, Theron Lassiter. 6 months. He'd been building this for 6 months, while I cooked dinner, while I slept beside him, while he managed the trust portfolio, growing it, nurturing it, performing the role of the dedicated husband steward who took my father's legacy seriously.
Shell company, actress, gala, timing, police report, each one locked into the next. This wasn't a man who snapped. This was a man who drafted, revised, and executed the way he used to draft investment strategies, with spreadsheets and contingencies and a timeline that ran 6 months deep while we split a bottle of wine on our anniversary. Petra's investigator had a diagram on the wall. I stared at it, each node connected by dotted lines: entity formation, bank account, contractor payment, gala date, signing window, police filing. My husband's name sat at the center. Every dotted line led back to him, every date, every payment, every filing, and he'd been telling me he loved me through all of it. I saw his face. A dinner party, maybe 2 years before all this. The Kaplan's table, people we saw maybe twice a year. Someone asked about the trust casually, the way rich people ask each other about money, with precision disguised as curiosity. I said, Farron isn't a beneficiary, but that's just how my dad structured it. I remember saying it lightly, like it was a footnote, like it didn't matter. Farron's jaw tightened. 1 second. Then he smiled and changed the subject. I noticed. I told myself it was nothing. That was the moment, wasn't it? That 1 second jaw clench at a dinner party 3 years ago. That was the frequency I couldn't hear. He heard my father's terms read aloud in casual company, the terms that said he would never touch the money no matter how long he stayed, no matter how much he grew it, and his face moved before he could stop it. $400 million, that's what he added to the trust over 5 years. Real returns, verifiable performance. He walked into a marriage worth $1.4 billion and grew it to $1.8. And my father's trust document, written before they had ever shaken hands, said none of that mattered. Not $1 of growth changed his status. He was always the son-in-law, never the name on the door. Was that fair? I'm asking, because the answer matters. My father locked him out preemptively, excluded him from a fortune he hadn't tried to steal yet, using terms written before they'd ever shaken hands. Was that control, or was it the kind of old money control that treats every outsider as a threat? Because if it was control, then Farron's anger was real. And real anger doesn't make someone innocent, but it makes them human. He was human, and he was a thief. Both things were true. And sitting in that conference room, staring at a diagram that mapped the end of my marriage in dotted lines and entity filings, I couldn't separate the man who grew $400 million from the man who hired a stranger to steal it back. Wednesday afternoon, Petra's conference room, blinds drawn. Her team had obtained the CCTV footage from the trust company, standard 30-day retention, expedited through a legal request Petra filed Tuesday night. The footage existed because institutions keep cameras running in signing rooms. Nobody ever expects to need them. Petra dimmed the lights and pressed play. A woman walked into the signing room. My height, my build, dark hair styled the way I style mine, low, controlled, pinned. She wore tailored clothing, a dark blazer, a cream blouse. She walked the way I walk, straight posture, unhurried, deliberate. She sat down across from the notary, adjusted the documents on the table, and signed. Sunglasses on, the whole time. I understood now. The notary's comment, "You kept your sunglasses on the whole time." She wasn't being particular. She was hiding her face. The sunglasses were the mask. The woman signed with fluid confidence, no hesitation, no checking the documents twice. She'd practiced. She knew the motions. She knew the signature. She finished, placed the pen down, stood, and left. 11 minutes. The entire performance lasted 11 minutes. I sat in a darkened conference room and watched a stranger walk into that signing room, sit in my chair, write my name, and walk out. 11 minutes. And the notary, whose entire job was to verify identity, never questioned it for 1 second. Petra froze the frame. Look at her wrist.
The image held on the woman's left hand mid-signature, the pen between her fingers, the paper beneath her palm, and on the inside of her left wrist, a small tattoo, dark ink, simple design, unmistakable on the frozen frame. Petra looked at me. I held up my own left wrist beside the screen. Bare. No tattoo, no ink, no mark, just skin. 2 wrists, one real, one hired. That's our visual proof, Petra said. Different body, different person. The notary can identify the signer all she wants. The skin doesn't match. Then the second piece, Petra's investigator had been running financial traces all day, a payment listed as event services contractor from a sub-account linked to the same private bank that held the Redstone Capital Partners signatory account. The payment was made 3 weeks before the signing. Amount, routing number, account holder, all roads leading back to Theron's financial infrastructure. He paid her. He hired a woman to walk into a room and be me. He found someone with the right height and the practiced hand, and he gave her my signature to practice and my clothes to wear and my chair to sit in. And when she was done, she walked out and he called the police on his wife. The evidence was complete. Alibi, entity trace, CCTV, tattoo, payroll. 5 pieces, each one building on the last. Petra could present this to a judge. But I need you to understand something. The money, $1.8 billion, I was going to get that back. The law was going to work. The evidence chain was clean. Petra would file the emergency motion tonight, and tomorrow morning a judge would see what we had. The legal question was nearly answered. The question that wasn't, the one no courtroom handles, was simpler and worse. He didn't forge my signature. He found someone to be me. He replaced me. Any woman with the right height and a practiced hand could have been Cosima Larchmont, could have walked into that room, signed that name, and no one in the world would have known the difference. To him, I was never a person. I was a function, a signature on a dotted line, and the function was replaceable. Not the money, not the arrest, not the shell company or the 6 months. He proved I was interchangeable. That's what I can't put down. And the worst part wasn't that she could do it. It was that nobody noticed she wasn't me. Petra filed the emergency motion at 4:17 p.m. Hearing set for Thursday morning. Last available date before the contestation window closed at Friday close of business. Everything rode on tomorrow. 1 hearing, 1 judge, 1 chance. I didn't go back to the penthouse. Wednesday night, I drove to the Larchmont house, my father's house, the brownstone on 61st, the one I grew up in, the one I couldn't bring myself to sell after he died. I hadn't stayed there in months. The housekeeper kept it ready. Fresh sheets, stocked refrigerator, a maintained mausoleum for a man who'd been gone 2 years. His study, dark walnut shelves floor to ceiling, leather wingback behind a broad desk, heavy curtains drawn, the amber desk lamp, the same one he'd used for 30 years, casting the room in a warm glow that made everything feel honest. A mantel clock ticking. The room smelled like old paper and leather polish. His room. Still his. I sat at the desk, not in his chair. Not yet. I pulled up a second chair and spread Petra's evidence binder across the surface. Tomorrow's sequence. The strategy. Every document. Every timestamp. Every frozen CCTV frame. Alibi. Entity trace. CCTV. Tattoo. Payroll. 5 pieces of proof that my husband was a criminal. Tomorrow morning, I would sit in a courtroom and present this evidence on the record. A judge would hear it. A court reporter would transcribe it. The press, if they were there, would print it. And Theron would be sitting 12 feet away while every lie he built was dismantled in public with his name attached. There's no version of that morning where the marriage survives. Not legally, not publicly, not privately. I'd spent 5 years building a life with this man, and tomorrow I would take the same hands that held his at our wedding and use them to sign documents that ended him. I opened the center desk drawer. Inside, my father's papers, his notes on the trust structure, amendments he'd drafted, revisions he'd considered, concerns he'd documented in his precise blue ink script. I'd seen some of these before after his death, during the initial estate process. I hadn't read them carefully. I hadn't needed to. I needed to now. I turned the pages slowly. His annotations filled the margins, careful, considered, the handwriting of a man who thought in paragraphs and edited in margins. And then I found it. Beside the in-person amendment clause, circled, in his hand. No representative, no proxy, her hand, her presence, always. 9 words. He wrote 9 words in the margin of a legal document, and those 9 words were the reason Theron needed a woman in a chair. Without this clause, there's no actress, no signing room, no CCTV, no tattoo. My father built the wall that forced the workaround that created the evidence that was going to save me tomorrow. He wrote this before I brought Theron home the first time, before the engagement, before the wedding, before the first anniversary, the second, the third, before Theron grew the trust by $400 million and earned the right to resent the terms that excluded him, before any of it. He knew. Not Theron specifically, but the shape of the threat. A man who would try to access what he built through someone she loved. He saw it coming because he understood something I didn't, that the people who love you and the people who need what you have can be the same person, and you might never know which one you married until it's too late. He asked me once, right here, in this room, sitting in that chair, "Are you sure, Cosima?" Not about the trust, not about the wedding plans, about Theron. About the man I was inviting past the walls he'd spent 40 years building. I was sure. I was 29 years old and sure the way only someone who's never been wrong about a person can be sure, completely, without reservation, with the specific confidence of a woman who believed her own judgment was the one thing she'd never have to question. He didn't argue. He didn't warn me. He asked his question, he heard my answer, and he accepted it. And then, I know this now, he went back to his desk, opened the trust document, and wrote 7 words in the margin beside the in-person clause. He accepted my answer, and then he protected me from it. I sat in his chair. First time. The leather settled under my weight, cold at first, then warming. The desk lamp lit the evidence binder from the right. The mantel clock ticked. The room held me the way rooms hold people who belong in them. Tomorrow, I would walk into a courtroom and prove my father right. I would save his trust. I would end my marriage. And I would carry the knowledge that the man who built these walls, the man who asked one quiet question and never pressed, saw what I refused to see for 5 years. His victory, my indictment. Same evidence, same courtroom, same morning. Thursday morning, state court. Wood panels, recessed lighting, an elevated bench that made everyone below it look answerable. I'd been in courtrooms before, estate filings, trust administration, the clean legal errands of wealth. Never like this. Never as the accused. Never with my husband 12 feet away. I wore a charcoal sheath dress, black pumps, the gold chain, hair pulled back tight, a controlled chignon, no strands loose, nothing out of place. I dressed the way my father would have expected, the way you dress when you want the clothes to disappear and let the evidence speak. Petra sat beside me. Navy suit, pinstripe, white shirt buttoned to the collar, no glasses. She didn't need them. She'd memorized every document, every timestamp, every frame of that footage. She sat with her hands flat on the table and her pale eyes already locked on the respondent's table across the aisle. Theron. Charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie, one button open at the collar, his steel watch catching the overhead light. He looked composed. He looked... God, I hated this. He looked reasonable. The concerned husband, the wronged party. His attorney sat beside him reviewing papers, and Theron sat with his shoulders back and his hands still, and that brow slightly furrowed, the same expression he'd worn in the hallway Monday morning while I was being handcuffed in the foyer. His attorney filed a motion to dismiss. The words were careful and rehearsed. Last-minute theatrics designed to delay legitimate trust administration. The implication, spoken in the tone of a man who believed his own performance, was that I was desperate, unstable, grasping. Theron made eye contact with me across the courtroom, and he gave me the look, the concerned look, the sympathetic tilt, the expression that said, "I'm sorry this is happening to you." He was still performing, 12 feet away from the woman he'd had arrested for a crime he commissioned, and he was still playing the role. The judge allowed our presentation to proceed. Petra stood. I've seen people do their jobs well. Petra didn't do her job well. She did it the way a surgeon does, with no wasted movement, no unnecessary word, no single gesture that wasn't in service of the cut she was about to make. First, the alibi. She presented the time-stamped photographs. Cosima Larchmont arriving at the charity gala at 7:15 p.m. Keynote speech at 8:30 p.m. 400 witnesses, 300 miles from the trust company's satellite office. The trust amendment was signed at 7:40 p.m. Physical impossibility, established in 45 seconds. The courtroom processed this quietly. Theron's attorney took a note. Theron didn't move. Second, the CCTV. Petra played the footage on the courtroom's wall-mounted screen. The gallery watched a woman walk into a signing room. My height, my build, my style of clothing. She sat, she signed, she left. 11 minutes. The gallery leaned forward, every head tilted toward the screen. I could feel the room's attention shift from bureaucratic procedure to something they recognized as wrong. Third, the freeze. Petra paused. The image held on the woman's left hand, mid-signature, pen between her fingers, paper beneath her palm, and on the inside of her left wrist, a small, dark tattoo. "Your Honor," Petra said, "the petitioner will now demonstrate." I stood. I held up my left wrist beside the screen. Bare. No tattoo. No mark. Just skin. The courtroom turned. Not dramatically. People don't gasp in real courtrooms. Chairs shifted. The court reporter's fingers paused over her keys. Someone in the gallery exhaled. Every eye moved from the screen to my wrist, and then, slowly, individually, inevitably, to Theron. His jaw tightened. The masseter muscle, the one I'd watched clench hundreds of times at dinner parties, during late-night arguments, in the hallway Monday morning, contracted one final time. His composure didn't crack. It vacated. The expression left his face. Not anger, not guilt. Absence. The look of a man watching 6 months of architecture collapse because he couldn't control every inch of skin on a woman he hired. Fourth, the payroll. Petra placed the document on the evidence table. Payment to an event services contractor from an account traced to Theron Lassiter, 3 weeks before the signing. His attorney requested a recess. Denied. The judge spoke. I heard the words, "Emergency injunction granted. Transfer halted, trust amendment voided, charges against Cosima Larchmont referred to dismissal, criminal investigation against Theron Lassiter recommended to the district attorney's office. Theron stood. His attorney guided him toward the door. He walked past me, 12 feet, the same distance as the hallway, the same distance as the courtroom aisle, and he never looked at me. He never looked at me again. I stood at the plaintiff's table with Petra beside me, and the evidence binder open, and the courtroom emptying, and the mantel clock in my father's study ticking 7 miles away, and I felt exactly nothing. Not relief, not triumph, not grief. My body didn't know what to do with the silence. I won. My name was cleared, my father's trust was intact, Theron was finished. And I stood in that courtroom and felt the specific emptiness of a woman who proved her husband was a criminal using evidence that existed because her dead father built the walls she married through.
Petra walked me to the courthouse steps. She didn't congratulate me. She handed me a business card, a criminal defense attorney in case Theron's team attempted counter motions. "It's not over until the investigation closes," she said, "but the trust is safe." That was it. No handshake, no smile. She turned and walked toward a waiting car, already checking her phone. Petra doesn't celebrate. She invoices. I respected that about her more than I could say. I went home. The penthouse. Same marble foyer where the officer stood Monday morning. Same floor-to-ceiling glass. Same city beyond it. Indifferent, moving, oblivious to the fact that a courtroom 7 miles south had just voided a theft that would have made the evening news if anyone had been paying attention. Farron's jacket was still draped over the back of a dining chair, his reading glasses on the nightstand in the bedroom, a half-finished crossword on the kitchen counter, his handwriting, his pen, the infrastructure of a man who lived here 72 hours ago and would never live here again. I didn't move any of it. Not yet. The mugshot. I thought about the mugshot standing at that window. Monday morning, billionaire heiress arrested for forgery. It ran before I'd even been processed. 3 outlets picked it up. 2 used photos of me from the charity gala, which was its own kind of cruel. The same event that gave me my alibi gave them their thumbnail. Thursday afternoon, charges dismissed. Husband under investigation. It would run eventually. Page 6. Smaller headline. Fewer shares. Accusation is front page. Exoneration is a correction buried on page 6. One makes noise. The other whispers. Gerald was in the lobby when I came in. The doorman. 63 years old. He looked at me the way he had Monday, and then he looked at the floor. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I was cleared, that the officers were wrong and the warrant was wrong, and everything the building saw Monday morning was a lie designed by the man who shared my elevator. I didn't, because the look on Gerald's face wasn't confusion. It was the look he'd had Monday morning, unchanged. A judge cleared me Thursday. Gerald's face didn't get the memo. Gerald would always remember pressing that elevator button while a woman in a silk robe was led away in handcuffs. I stood at the window, same glass, same view, same spot where I'd been standing with coffee in my hand when the knock came 4 days ago. The reflection was the same, a woman in expensive clothes in an expensive room looking out at a city that would believe what it wanted to believe. 4 days. A marriage lost, a crime proven, a fortune saved, and the only reason anyone caught it was a tattoo on a stranger's wrist and 9 words my dead father wrote in a margin. I drove to 61st. The study. His study. Thursday evening, the same room I'd sat in last night preparing the evidence, the same desk lamp casting the same amber glow, the same mantel clock ticking the same seconds. 24 hours ago, I'd been sitting in this room preparing to save his legacy. Now his legacy was saved, and I was back. I took off my shoes, left them by the door. The hardwood was cold under my feet. the same cold as the marble foyer Monday morning, bare feet on a floor I owned but couldn't feel safe in. Different floor, same cold. The chignon was falling apart. I let it. Strands of hair at my temples, across my forehead. The charcoal dress that had been armor in the courtroom was just fabric now. The gold chain at my collarbone, the stud earrings. I looked like a woman who'd won a war and walked home in the same clothes. I sat in his chair. The leather settled. The desk lamp lit the surface from the right. The evidence binder was gone, back at Petra's office, filed and cataloged. What was left was his things, his papers, his margins. I opened the drawer. I took out the note. No representative, no proxy. Her hand, her presence, always. I read it twice. The same way I'd read it last night, but last night I was reading it as preparation. Tonight, I was reading it as cost. He wrote this at this desk, under this lamp, after I told him I was sure about Theron, knowing I wouldn't listen, knowing the walls might have to work without his help someday because he was dying, and he knew that too, even then, even before the diagnosis. 9 words. That's what he left me. Not a warning, not a lecture, not a list of Theron's flaws or demand that I reconsider. 9 words in a margin, circled in blue ink. The quietest protection a father can build, protection that doesn't ask for credit, the kind you don't understand until it saves you. It saved me. And the reason it needed to save me was sitting in this chair 2 years ago, telling her father she was sure about a man who would hire a stranger to replace her. Was he protecting me? Or was he controlling me from the grave, the way rich men control things, by building structures too elegant to argue with and too permanent to undo? I don't know. I'll never know. He's gone. The answer is in the margins of a trust document, and margins don't explain themselves. What I know is this. The trust is safe. $1.8 billion. My father's life, his work, his name. Intact. Theron is gone. The marriage is over. The law worked. The walls held. And I'm sitting in the chair of a man who asked me one question, accepted my answer, and then quietly made sure my answer couldn't destroy me. I rested my wrist on the arm of the chair. Left wrist. There. No handcuffs. No tattoo. No ring. Just skin on leather. His chair. My wrist. The room warm. And amber. And still. The mantel clock ticked. The shelves held his books. The walls held. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I knew where I was. And for tonight, that was enough.
They arrested me on a Monday. By Thursday, I'd cleared my name, saved my father's trust, and ended my marriage in open court. 4 days. That's how long it takes to prove you're real when someone hires a woman to be you. The trust is intact. $1.8 billion. Every dollar my father built and every dollar Theron grew, sitting exactly where it belongs, under my name, my real name, the one no actress can practice into existence. Theron is gone. Criminal investigation pending. His attorneys are negotiating. I don't follow it. I don't need to. But I think about him. Not the fraud. Not the shell company or the signing room or the police report he filed with my name on it. I think about year 2, a Sunday morning. He made coffee and brought it to me in bed and said nothing for 20 minutes, just sat beside me, reading. Was that real? Or was I always the signature, the function, the woman-shaped key that opened the door to what he actually wanted? I don't know, and I've stopped needing to. My father asked me one question. I answered wrong. He accepted my answer, and then he wrote 9 words in a margin and made sure the walls would hold, even if I opened the gate. They held. People ask me how I'm doing. I say fine. That's not true, but it's not a lie either. It's the word you use when the real answer is too long and too honest for the person asking. The real answer is, I saved everything except the part of me that believed I could see people clearly. That part is gone. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it shouldn't. I sit in his chair now, my father's chair. The leather is warm. The clock still ticks. The shelves still hold his books. And the walls, his walls, still stand. He built them for me. I almost didn't need them. Almost. If someone can hire a woman to be you and no one notices the difference, then who are you when no one's pretending? I don't have an answer, but I have a chair and a clock and 9 words in a margin that saved everything.
This is American Billionaire Tales, where fortune meets fate. The walls held. She's still deciding if she's grateful or trapped. Next time, every account she had was frozen the morning he filed. $260 million on paper. She couldn't buy her daughter's medicine. Then she pulled the records, and the money had been moving for weeks before the divorce was even filed. Subscribe. The endgame had already made its mistake.